Glory to Jesus Christ, High Deacon Lazarus of the St. Gregory the Enlightener Institute, and this is an Orthodox Minute. We are continuing on with the talk about the fasting in the Byzantine tradition, and we are on part 2. From what do we fast? Now, my goal today is not to tell you how you should fast. Instead, my goal is to share with you some basic principles from the Byzantine tradition to help you understand how to develop a practice of fasting which is in accord with our tradition. First, the East has a very different approach to fasting than the West. Whereas the West states the minimum rule for everyone, the approach of the East is kind of the opposite. The East states the maximum and encourages the faithful to do their best to try to keep it. So, for example, in the Western tradition, they might say, at the very minimum, don't eat meat on Fridays, and don't eat more than one full meal on each Friday in Lent and on Ash Wednesday, and so forth. And then in their tradition, and we have to be fair to them, what they would say is, and then the rest, you can do, you're encouraged to do other works of penance in addition to that, but that's the minimum that you should do. The East takes kind of the opposite approach. It states the maximum and encourages the faithful to do their best to try to keep it. Most people today would have a very difficult time imagining themselves going 40 or 50 days without meat, fish, dairy, or oil. But we have to remember the principle: don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Although we may not be able to keep the strictest or fullest form of the fast, surely we can keep some of it. Therefore, with each new penitential period of the church year, we have plenty of opportunity to develop our practice of fasting. And one reflection on this idea of stating the maximum. That's perfection. And even as my pastor, Father Lev, often says, the church, calls us, as God calls us, to be perfect. And to the degree that we fall short of keeping this fast in the most fullest of ways, that serves as a reminder of our imperfection and our need to grow ever closer to God. And in the event we could even keep the full fast, then there's even more with reducing our intake of food as well. So there's always farther you can go. Just like with God and His infancy, His infiniteness, we can always go deeper into God and to learn and grow more into His image and likeness. So although we may not be able to keep the strictest form of the fast, each penitential period gives us new opportunities to go farther. To start, we have to remember our Holy Fathers teach us that abstinence and fasting from food are indispensable as tools of repentance. St. Basil the Great once said, quote, "Since we were wounded by sin, we must treat sin with penance. But penance without fasting is worthless. Therefore, justify yourself before God by fasting." Unquote. So, for Eastern Christians, fasting from food remains an essential part of repentance. To make sense of our observance of meat fair and cheese fair Sundays, we have to recognize that our Byzantine tradition calls us in some way to regulate and reduce our consumption of food which is derived from animals, including meat, fish, and dairy. And some Westerners are surprised to see that fish is considered a meat as well. In the East, fasting is more about the regulation or intake of food from animals rather than just the giving up of meat. The more important the penitential day or period, the more we try to avoid these. These ascetical acts can be further described either as abstinence or fasting. Abstinence refers to the avoiding of certain kinds of foods for a period of time, like not eating meat, dairy, or fish on certain days. Fasting is the avoidance of all food for a duration of time, like not eating or drinking anything until noon each day. Both of these ascetical acts are helpful and important. But we must note that all things must be done in moderation. The best way to develop our practice of fasting is with the assistance of a spiritual father or mother. This can be a priest, a deacon, a monk, or a nun who is familiar with our Byzantine fasting tradition. Apostolic Canon 66 states that we never fast on Sundays because it is the Lord's Day. It is also important to emphasize in the Eastern tradition that the fast is meant to be a corporate one in which all the faithful work together as one body. We assist one another through our prayers, fasting, and almsgiving. We can even work together to help each other keep the fast, as is evidenced in the many Lenten recipe books that exist, filled with recipes for dishes without meat or dairy. It is equally important to note that it has never been the practice of the East to legalistically judge those who fall short of the full fast. St. Paul admonishes us, quote, "The man who will eat anything must not ridicule him who abstains from certain foods. The man who abstains must not sit in judgment on him who eats. Who are you to pass judgment on another's servant?" Unquote. And that's from Romans 11. Indeed, in the Paschal homily of St. John Chrysostom, who reposed in 407, which is read every year on the holy feast of Pascha, St. John speaks directly to those who are unable to keep the traditional fast in the most embracing and encouraging of words. Lastly, in the Byzantine tradition on fasting, it is not just limited to diet. We are called to avoid whatever is contrary to the penitential spirit of the season. As St. John Chrysostom once warned, quote, "It is possible for one who fasts not to be rewarded for his fasting." How? When indeed we abstain from foods, but we do not abstain from iniquities. When we do not eat meat, but we gnaw to pieces the homes of the poor. When we do not become drunkards with wine, but we become drunkards with evil pleasures. When we abstain all the day, but all the night we spend in unchaste shows. Then, what is the benefit of abstaining from foods? When on the one hand you deprive your body of a selected food, but on the other you offer yourself in unlawful food. And this concludes our second section, and we'll resume with another presentation following this. Thank you, and God bless you.